Hey, how's it going? This is James with VFX Nomad, and today we're going to do a quick spotlight on scopes in Clarisse, and I will attempt to explain to you what they are and how to use them. So the first thing that anyone's going to ask is, what is a scope? It's a little bit tricky to explain, so what I will try and do is just show you. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a poly grid, he says, and then doesn't press the button. Try again, poly grid. There we go. And I'm just going to focus on it and make this a lot bigger. Okay, stage 1 complete. Stage 2, I am going to create a material. So standard material. And I'm going to drag and drop that onto here so that I can see it without having to render. I'm going to change this to previs. And just to make sure that this is all working, I'm going to change the diffuse color to something. Okay, so we see this works. Perfect. Done. Now, this is where we're going to look at scopes for the first time. Now, if you right click and you just hover over the menu, there's a neat little shortcut where you can just start typing the thing that you want. And what you'll see here is that 2 scopes turn up, and we're going to need both of them. So we're going to do the first one, and you see when it drops down, it actually calls itself texture scope. But when we looked at it over here, it just calls itself scope. So it can throw you a little bit, but don't worry too much about it just for the moment. And then we're going to create the other one as well. Now, if that right click thing isn't working for you, just right click, go new. And instead of typing, you can just go new, and you'll see that the first one is here. And then the second one, if you go to texture, utility, scope, the second one is here. Now that all seems a bit cryptic, but hopefully I'll decode it for you in just a second. Now, this is the scope itself. This is just a box. All right. And if you remember, I said it could be a box, a sphere, or a cylinder. So if you go to the bottom of the attributes, you'll see that we have the option of box, sphere, cylinder. All right. But on its own, it's not really doing anything. And that's because the first half, this scope, needs to plug into the second half, which is the texture scope. So we're going to drag and drop that in here. If that doesn't work for you, just click add and add the scope manually that way. Either one works. They're both very good. And we'll come back to this in a second, but you'll see that it says inside and outside color. But just so that we can see it, we're going to take this texture scope and drop it into the texture slot. And then we're going to look at what we get. Okay, this is in essence all a scope is. This shape here is a sphere, right? And we can change it, as we've discussed, to a box or anything else. And what it does is it says, I said we come back to this. If we look at the texture, it says whatever is inside the box is going to be white, and whatever is outside the box is going to be black. Now you may wonder why anyone would do that, and why it's useful. Now, this was made originally many moons ago when I was back at DNEG, and the reason that it was made was that when you were scattering points, quite often you get feedback and they'd say, hey, everything's great except for that one bit of grass or that particular tree or whatever. And the problem at the time was we didn't have any particle painting tools. I mean, we do now, they're over here. But anyway, this harks back to then. And so some very clever people at DNEG came up with this. And what it was to just move this. So you have a decimation map in a texture. If you don't know about this, it doesn't matter. But in essence, you move this to where you wanted to get rid of the tree or the piece of grass. And then you plugged in the texture scope and away it went. And it's such a good idea that they've now rolled it into the package as a whole. Now, you're not just limited to decimating things. You can use this for anything that you can think of. Quite a lot of the time, people will use it for textures. So if, for example, you have water and underneath the water you want one texture and above the water you want another, quick, fast way to do it is to just use this, and then you can choose the blend. But in essence, that is what a scope does. So just to recap one more time, we're going to delete all of this just so I can rebuild it for you. We're going to go new scope, This is the actual object that we're going to look at. So whatever shape you want it to be. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to New Texture Utility, and down here there's Scope, and this is going to say give me some scopes. Okay, unfortunately they didn't make the names particularly clear here, but it's asking you for the first one. So now I've dropped that scope in, and I get to decide here what the inside color is and what the outside color is. So here I'm saying inside is white, outside is black. And if I wanted to, you could create more than one scope, and you could plug multiple scopes in here. That works too. Wonderful. And then all I did to be able to show it to you was I created a piece of geometry, in this case, our plane. I dropped a material on that plane like that. And then I just plugged the texture scope into what we were looking at, like that. Okay, so you can see that both of these scopes are now working. You can change the second one to whatever you want. You know, that's all good. Sphere, cylinder, whatever. Texture scope here, you'll see that the mode is union intersection. Fairly straightforward when you just flick around with them. And XYZ dimensions, as in, is 3D space. So I think that's it, really. That is a scope. That's what a scope does. Use it on particles, use it on textures, use it on whatever it is that you feel like. In essence, all it is, a shape with one color inside, one color outside. I hope that was helpful. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. Bye.